Okay, so you want to own a liquor store. So count what you think you are buying. 4 walls, a cooler, a wall of bottles that other people made, a register, a clerk, and 6 parking spaces. Picture the good version. It is Friday evening, the door chime keeps going, and cold air rolls out of the walk in cooler across your ankles. The shelf light catches the amber in the bourbon. Somebody buys the expensive bottle for a wedding and never looks at the price. Now add the one item that is not in the room. In North Carolina, a case of that bourbon reaches the shelf at $285.18. The distiller who made it was paid $150. Nobody in that store put the difference there. There is a document that says so out loud. North Carolina General Statute 18B, Section 804, is the state law that sets how the price of a bottle is built. The Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission publishes the arithmetic on its own website, line by line, because in North Carolina, the state owns the warehouse and has to show its work. It is the only place in America where the markup on a bottle is printed in public. Here is what those lines say. The distiller is paid $150.27 for the case. A bailment charge of $2.75 pays for storing it. The board takes $60.60, a markup of 39.6%. And none of that money has reached a shelf yet. The state excise tax then takes $64.08, 30% on top. An additional markup adds $7.48. Look at the order of those lines. The bottle was made once and marked up 4 times, and not one of those 4 hands has ever unlocked a door at 7 in the morning. A liquor store is not a retailer. It is a licensed toll booth that happens to stock bottles. So what does the store itself keep? In a private license state, the board's markup is not there, and the retailer's own take is thin. Gross margin runs 20 to 30% of what the customer pays. So on a case of 12 bottles selling at $300, the store keeps $60 to $90 before a single bill is paid. The hands ahead of you in that chain are not taking a risk on the bottle. You are. Let me give you a ruler and do the math with me every time it appears. 1 unit is 1 hour of a liquor store cashier's time, which the Bureau of Labor Statistics put at $14.99 in May of 2024. So that North Carolina case, 12 bottles inside it, costs a customer 19 cashier hours, and 1 bottle costs 1.6. The margin was never in the bottle. It was in the paperwork that lets you touch the bottle. Forget North Carolina for a minute. It is the only state that prints its arithmetic, which makes it perfect for reading a price and useless for buying a business, because there the state owns the stores. So go to Texas. In Collin County, north of Dallas, there is a package store on the market. The listing says $1.25 million of revenue in a year. It says $219,000 of sellers' discretionary earnings, which is the money left for the owner after every cost, including the wage the owner pays themselves for standing at the register. I picked Texas on purpose, and not for the bourbon. In Texas, the package store permit cost $1,800 for 2 years, and a local government can add up to $500 on top. That is the whole barrier. Anyone who passes the background check can have one. So the Texas store shows you this business with the license distortion stripped out, which is the only way to see what the shop itself earns. Hold on to that. In 2 other states I am going to show you, that same sheet of paper is the most expensive object in the building. Do the math with me on the $219,000. Divide it by the ruler, and you get 14,610 cashier hours. A full-time year is about 2,080 hours. So the owner of the store takes home what 7 clerks take home, and the owner is one of the 7, because somebody has to open on Sunday. Except in Texas, where package stores are closed on Sunday by law. That is 1/7 of your week legislated away, and we will come back to it. At the median multiple that liquor stores actually change hands for, 3.04 times earnings, this store is worth about $666,000. So you are being asked to hand over $666,000 to buy a job that pays 7 wages. That is not a scam. It is also not what the photograph in the listing is selling. Now widen the frame. There are 36,433 beer, wine, and liquor stores in the United States, according to the Census Bureau's county business patterns for 2023. Every one of them buys from the same distributors, at prices set in the same schedules, and sells bottles made by the same few companies. Sit with that, because it decides everything that follows. You cannot make your product cheaper. You cannot make it better. You cannot make it different. The bourbon on your shelf is identical to the bourbon on the shelf a mile away, down to the batch. So what is left to compete on? Location, hours, how fast the line moves, and one thing nobody in the parking lot can see, which is whether you were allowed to open at all. That is the entire menu, which is why the industry's own numbers are about volume rather than cleverness. In 2024, American distillers sold $37.2 billion of spirits at supplier level across 312.2 million cases. Spirits are now the largest slice of American alcohol by revenue. And Adam Hoffer, who tracks excise taxes state by state at the Tax Foundation, works in the reason why the shelf price looks the way it does. Because by the distiller's own accounting, more than half of what a customer pays for a bottle of spirits is tax. You collect that tax. You hold it. You hand it over. You are paid nothing for the service. You are not opening a shop. You are applying to become the last unpaid step in somebody else's collection system. So let us build one from nothing. Empty unit, no shelves, no bottles, no permission. I am going to price every line, and I am going to tell you where each number came from. Line 1 is permission. In Texas, $1,800 for 2 years, plus up to $500 locally. Line 2 is the same permission in Napa County, California, where a Type 21 off-sale general license changes hands on the secondary market for around $120,000. Line 3 is the same permission again in Union County, New Jersey, where a license listed in Westfield carries an asking price of $1 million. Same paper, same bottles, same customer. The state of New Jersey's own fee schedule tops out in the low thousands. The million is not the price of the license. It is the price of being the person allowed to receive it. Line 4 is the roof. Average retail asking rent in early 2024 ran about $24.69 a square foot. So a 2,000 square foot unit costs $49,380 a year. Strip mall space is a little cheaper, $22.86, which buys you a neighbor who sells phone cases. Line 5 is turning the empty box into a store, and here no receipt survives. Broker guidance puts basic move-in work at $8,000 to $10,000, and I am giving you that as a reconstruction, not as a fact. Line 6 is cold. A walk-in cooler box costs $2,903 and $6,692 once the refrigeration is on it. Line 7. A freezer, $5,355 to $15,801. Line 8, a point-of-sale system, $2,000 to $5,000 in the first year. Cold air, and a card reader. That is the entire technology of this industry. Line 9 is the shelves, and it is the line that breaks people. Opening inventory for a small store starts near $33,500 and runs past $109,000. That money is not spent. It is parked, in glass, and it comes back to you one bottle at a time, which is a very different thing from having it. Line 10 is people at $14.99 an hour. Line 11 is the card networks, taking an average of 2.35% in 2024 of everything that goes through the reader. Line 12 is shrink, 1.6% of sales, the last figure the National Retail Federation published from 2022 before it discontinued that survey. Some of that walks out of the door, some of it breaks, some of it is drunk in the stockroom. Line 13 is the one I did not expect. Delivery platforms charge 15, 25, or 30% of the order, depending on the tier the store signs up for. Now go back to the gross margin on a bottle, 20 to 30%, and put those two numbers side by side. On the top tier, a bottle can leave your store, reach a happy customer, and cost you money on the way out. The busiest hour of your Friday can be the hour you lose the most. Add the low end of the whole build, with the cheap Texas permission, and the guidance for opening one of these lands near $200,000. On the ruler, that is 13,342 cashier hours. 6.5 years of one person, full-time, at a register, before the door opens once, and the Collin County store costs $666,000. That gap, $466,000, is not bricks and it is not stock. It is the price of proof that the customers already come. We have seen this shape before, in a marsh in North Wales. Now the year itself. A Texas package store may sell from 10 in the morning until 9 at night, Monday through Saturday, and not at all on Sunday. That is 66 hours a week. The door is legally permitted to be open, and 3,432 hours in a year. You will personally be there for most of them, not because you want to be. Because the gap between a good year and a bad year in this business is theft, and the cheapest anti-theft device ever invented is an owner who knows exactly what the shelf is supposed to look like. So here is the day. You unlock at 9:30. The delivery arrives on the distributor's schedule and not on yours, and you check every case against the invoice, because a short case you failed to catch is money you have already paid for and will never sell. You price. You face the shelves. You wheel the cold stock into the walk-in. Then you stand. Nobody browses in a liquor store. The customer has decided before the door, has swung shut behind them, which means your only chance to sell them something better is a shelf at eye level and one sentence at the register. From 11 until 2, you sell singles and lottery tickets, and you make cents. From 5 until 8, you sell the entire day, and every transaction carries a legal test. The person in front of you might be 20. If you sell to them, the state does not fine the cashier. It comes for the permit. Everything in that building, the lease, the stock, the $666,000, rests on a piece of paper that a 17-year-old with a fake identity card can take away from you in 4 seconds. You close at 9, you count, you cash up, you do it again tomorrow, and the day you are ill you still do not close, because a dark liquor store on a Saturday night is not a rest. It is a customer learning the route to somebody else's parking lot. Call it 3,000 hours of your own labor in a year, in a job where you cannot leave the counter and cannot raise the price. It sounds unbearable. Before I put a single number in a column, here is what these numbers are. No private liquor store publishes its accounts. What follows is a model. The revenue and the earnings come from the broker's listing for the Collin County store. The cost lines come from published data, the rent survey, the federal wage figures, the card fee averages, the retail shrink survey. Insurance and utilities are reconstructed. This channel doesn't invent numbers, so I will tell you where the model is kind to itself, and it is kind in 3 places. I have charged no interest on the money you spent buying it, no payroll tax on the clerk, and nothing for the landlord's tax and insurance recharge. The average year, $1.25 million goes through the register. At a gross margin of 28%, that leaves $350,000 before costs. Rent takes $49,380. One full-time clerk, so that the building is not staffed by you alone for 66 hours a week, takes $31,179. Notice how few of these lines you control. The card networks take $29,375. Shrink takes $20,000. The permit and the local fee take about $1,400. None of those 3 was a business decision. Insurance, utilities, and the alarm, reconstructed, take $18,000. What is left is $200,666, which sits within 9% of what the listing claims, so the listing is broadly honest. The good year. A hot summer, a new apartment block behind the store, and the competitor 2 streets over gives up his lease. Revenue rises 15%, and because you can hold the premium bottles instead of discounting them, margin reaches 30%. That is $431,250 of gross profit. The rent does not move. Only the card fees and the shrink grow with the sales. What is left is $274,510. The disaster. In Texas, the disaster is not a fire, and it is not a robbery. It is the $1,800 permit, because anybody can have one, and somebody opens a mile closer to those apartments than you are. Revenue falls 1/5 to $1 million. You cut prices to hold the traffic, so margin falls to 22%, and gross profit is $220,000. Almost nothing on the cost side falls with it. The lease is signed, the clerk is still needed, and the lights burn the same 11 hours. What is left is $80,541. You still ate. Spread over 3,000 hours of your own work, you earned $26.85 an hour. The bill arrives every year whether the ship sails or not. Here is the part the listing will never show you. You paid $666,000 for this store. Put that same money into a 1-year treasury bill paying 4%, and it returns $26,640 a year for doing nothing at all. So the average year does not pay you $200,000. It pays you the difference, $174,026, in exchange for 3,000 hours behind a counter. That is $58.01 an hour. So is it worth it? At $58 an hour, with no manager above you, yes, if that is the job you want. At $26.85 in the bad year, with $250,000 locked inside the walls, that is a question about your nerve rather than your spreadsheet. And there is a fourth column that no broker will ever type onto a listing. It is the one where nothing goes wrong, you make no mistakes, and the customer simply changes. If you want to see that fourth column, subscribe, because it is where this story ends. Somebody designed this, and it was not a market. It was a settlement. When Prohibition ended in 1933, the states were handed the job of rebuilding the alcohol trade, and almost all of them built the same machine. 3 tiers. The producer may not own the wholesaler. The wholesaler may not own the retailer. Every bottle has to cross 2 arm's-length transactions before a customer can touch it, and every crossing is licensed and taxed. Then most states bolted on the second half. A cap. Only so many retail licenses per county, or per head of population, or none at all in a control state, where the government simply keeps the counter for itself. Say that out loud in modern language. A fixed number of permanent, transferable operating permits in a market with guaranteed demand and a legal ban on new entrants. That is a taxi medallion with a beer cooler, and it behaves like one. In New Jersey, where the population cap has barely moved in generations, the license is worth more than the building, the stock, and the fittings combined. The state issues it for a fee in the hundreds. It resells for $1 million. Nothing about the bottle changed. The paper changed hands. Every dollar of that $1 million is a transfer from the person who wants to open a store to the person who is already allowed to have one, which is also the answer to the Sunday. Texas closes its package stores on Sunday, not because the state dislikes commerce, but because this regime was never built to maximize sales. It was built to make alcohol retail countable, controllable, and few. Every rule that irritates you as an operator is the same rule keeping the 4th competitor off your street. That is the bargain. You are not being regulated instead of being protected. You are being protected by being regulated, and the price of the protection is that you had to buy your way in from somebody who was protected first. There is one cost in this ledger that is not paid in money. I am going to give it to you with its source and its date, and then I am going to move on. On the 4th of January 2012, the Bureau of Labor Statistics published a piece in its Economics Daily series, covering the years 2003 through 2008. It found that in beer, wine, and liquor stores, more than 4/5 of all fatal work injuries were homicides. Not falls, not vehicles, not machinery. Across retail as a whole, over those 6 years, there were 1,434 work-related homicides, and 835 of them, 58%, occurred during a robbery. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health has measured the workplace homicide rate in liquor stores at roughly 2 per 100,000 workers, against about 0.28 per 100,000 for workers generally. That is around 7 times the ordinary risk of being killed at work. There is a second finding, and it is an association rather than a proven cause. Research led by Pamela Trangenstein found that a 10% increase in access to off-premise alcohol outlets was associated with about 4.4% more violent crime in the surrounding area. The store is not only exposed to that risk, it is part of what the research links to it. And here is where the paperwork from earlier comes back. The person who has to refuse the sale to the 20-year-old and the person standing at that register at 9 at night with the day's cash in the drawer are the same person. You are paying them $14.99 an hour to carry both of those risks on your behalf. That is the line. I am not going to dress it up. Now the 4th column, the one where you do everything right, 3-1 is the customer. In July of 2025, Gallup, in work reported by Lydia Saad, found that 54% of American adults said they drink alcohol. In 2024, it was 58. In 2023, it was 62. That is not noise. That is a line, and it points down, and it is the lowest reading Gallup has recorded since it began asking in the 1930s. Among adults under 35, it is 50%. The people who do still drink reported an average of 2.8 drinks in the previous week, the lowest average the survey has produced. And 53% of Americans now say that even moderate drinking is bad for your health. A record high in that survey, 3.2 arrived faster than the trade planned for. In March of 2025, EY Parthenon published survey work on the new weight loss drugs and found that 44% of people taking them said they were drinking less, with 82% expecting that change to last. At the same time, the no alcohol and low alcohol category is growing at about 13.6% a year, while the category as a whole grows at 2.1. 3.3 does not look like a threat. It looks like a busy shop. Here is the dated kill. In its 2025 briefing, the Distilled Spirits Council, whose chief executive Chris Swanger presented the numbers, reported that American spirits revenue fell 2.2% to $36.4 billion, while volume rose 1.9% to 318.1 million cases. Read those two together, because they can only mean one thing. More bottles left the shelves and less money came back. The customer did not stop drinking. The customer traded down. Now lay that over your own ledger. Your rent does not trade down. Your clerk does not trade down. Your card fee is a percentage of a smaller ticket, so it shrinks by pennies. But your gross profit is also a percentage of that smaller ticket. And every point of margin you lose comes off the $200,000 at the bottom, not off the $1.25 million at the top. A 2% shift in what people will pay per bottle does not cost you 2%. It costs you a slice of the only number that was ever yours. The federal employment data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows it happening in real time. Employment in liquor stores fell 4.1% in 2025, after falling 1.8% the year before. Those are not stores burning down. Those are hours being cut, one shift at a time, by owners doing arithmetic exactly like this. And that is the ending nobody plans for. A liquor store does not usually die because the customers stopped coming. It dies because everybody came in, on schedule, at the usual time, and reached for the cheaper bottle. Somebody got rich here, and it was not the person at the register. Start with the state. On that North Carolina case, the distiller was paid $150.27. Everything stacked on afterwards, the bailment charge of $2.75, the board's $60.60, the excise tax of $64.08, and the additional markup of $7.48 comes to $134.91. Now, name the assumption before I break it. You probably assume that the shopkeeper, being the last hand on the bottle and the one carrying the rent, the theft and the license takes the biggest slice at the end of the chain. Run a private state retailer over a case of the same value at the same 25% margin, and the shopkeeper's gross profit is about $71. The layers added after the distiller are nearly twice what the retailer earns for ordering, chilling, insuring, staffing, and selling the thing. And the state does not open on Saturday. Second, the license holder, not the operator, the holder. Somebody in Union County, New Jersey, was issued a piece of paper for a fee in the hundreds and can now ask $1 million for it without ever having sold a bottle. That is the largest single transfer of wealth in this industry, and a cap created it rather than a product. Third, the middle tier. The distributor between the distiller and your stockroom is not there for logistics. It is there because the law demands 2 arm's-length transactions, and the law never said they had to be cheap. Fourth, the toll takers on the way out. The card networks take 2.35% of everything that touches the reader, and the delivery platforms take up to 30% of the order, which is more than the entire margin on the bottle. Fifth, the landlord. At $49,380 a year, who has never once been asked to card anybody, every one of them is paid before you are, and not one of them is in the building at 9 at night. So here is the verdict, in 6 parts. 1. It is a real business. The Collin County store returns $219,000 a year to its owner, and that is a listing with tax returns behind it. 2. It is not an investment. It is a job. Take out what your $666,000 would earn sitting in a treasury bill, and the job pays $58.01 an hour. 3. The spread is survivable at both ends. $274,510 in the good year, $80,541 in the bad one, and nobody loses the house. 4. The fragile thing is not the money. It is a permit that one careless sale at the register can end. 5. The uninsurable thing is the counter itself, where the leading cause of death at work is not a fall or a vehicle. It is homicide. 6. The direction of travel is against you. Volume up, revenue down, liquor store employment down 4.1% in a year, and half of everyone under 35 now saying they do not drink at all. And the number holding all of it is the one we opened with, $285.18, printed by a state government. For a case the distiller sold for $150. Some of the licenses trading in New Jersey today were issued when the cap was first set, generations ago. They get leased, inherited, and sold with the family name still attached. Because the shop is a business but the paper is an estate, the margin was never in the bottle. It was in the paperwork that lets you touch the bottle. Wards in this part, 690.